There were 60 people in that banquet hall on Airport Highway, and every single one of them was there to celebrate me. 31 years of Kowalski Mechanical, 31 years of commercial heating and cooling contracts across Northwest Ohio, of climbing onto rooftops in January when the wind comes off Lake Erie hard enough to knock a man down. 22 employees, a shop on Matzinger Road with my own name on the sign, and my son Travis stood up at the front of that room with a microphone in his hand, and he raised his glass of iced tea to his old man, and he said to Dad, he built this from nothing. Tonight, we make it official. Everybody clapped. My daughter Megan was crying, and then Travis brought out a leather folder and set it on the table in front of me, and beside him stood a woman in a gray blazer he introduced as a notary. Here, just to make the handover clean. Just a few signatures, Dad, he said, smiling. Ownership transfer, signing authority, some housekeeping. Then you can go fishing and never think about a purchase order again. He put the pen in my hand. 60 people watching, phones up, recording. My daughter smiling through her tears. And that's when Rosa Mendez, my bookkeeper, 19 years with the company, a woman who has never once in her life raised her voice, leaned over my shoulder to refill my water glass, and she said 4 words, so quietly I almost didn't catch them. Don't sign it, Dale. I turned my head. Her hand was shaking so hard, the water was rippling in the pitcher. She said, Please, your son is setting you up. And she walked away. I sat there in that banquet hall with a pen in my hand and 60 people waiting and my son smiling down at me, and I understood that whatever was in that folder was not what he said it was. I didn't know yet that if I had signed those papers that night, I would be sitting in a federal prison right now. 61 years old, 31 years of honest work, and my own son had built a cage for me and was standing there, holding the door open, telling me to step inside and smile for the camera. If you're new here, stick around, because this one goes somewhere you will not see coming. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one of them. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, do it now, because you're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Dale Kowalski. I'm 61 years old. I live in Toledo, Ohio, and I have worked with my hands since I was 17. I started Kowalski Mechanical in 1994 out of the back of a Chevy van with $1,100 and a set of gauges. Commercial HVAC, the big rooftop units on schools, warehouses, grocery stores. It's not glamorous work. Nobody claps for the guy who keeps the heat on. But when it's 12 degrees out and a nursing home's boiler goes down at 2 in the morning, somebody has to climb up there, and for 31 years, that somebody was me. I built it slow. 1 truck became 2, 2 became 9. By 2023, I had 22 people on the payroll, a shop and a yard on Matzinger Road, and contracts with half the school districts in Lucas County. And here's the thing you need to know about my hands. In 1988, before any of this, I was working a press at a shop out on Hill Avenue, and it came down on my right hand. Crushed 3 fingers and most of the small bones. They saved the hand, but it never worked right again. So at 32 years old, I taught myself to write left-handed. My signature has been a shaky, slanted, ugly-looking thing ever since. My wife, Bonnie, used to laugh at it. She said it looked like a lie detector test. Remember that. It matters more than anything else in this story. Bonnie and I were married 34 years. She died on March 9, 2023. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from the diagnosis to the funeral at St. Hedwig's. That's the kind of thing that hollows a man out. I went back to work 8 days later because I didn't know what else to do with myself, and I have never really stopped since. We had 2 kids, Megan, who's 30, and a nurse in the cardiac unit at ProMedica Toledo Hospital, and who is the best thing I ever helped make, and Travis. Travis is 34. He came into the business when he was 26, and I brought him in because that's what you do. You build something and you hand it to your children. He never wanted the trucks, never wanted the rooftops. He wanted the office. So I gave him the office. Purchasing, vendors, the books, the loans, the banking. Everything with a number on it. And I want to be honest with you, because I've had a lot of nights to think about it. I trusted my son completely, and I never once checked. Not one time in 8 years. He'd put a paper in front of me and say, "Dad, sign here. It's the equipment lease renewal." And I'd sign it without reading it, because he was my boy. Because a man doesn't audit his own son. That trust was the loaded gun, and I handed it to him myself. Travis had one problem, and it was the same problem he'd had since he was 19. He wanted to be a big man in a hurry. He drove a truck he couldn't afford. He and his wife Shelby bought a house in Perrysburg with a pool. He talked constantly about scaling and leverage and words he'd picked up from videos on his phone. And about 2.5 years ago, right around the time his mother got sick, he started spending time with a man named Doug Renner. Doug Renner called himself an equipment financing consultant. He wore good shoes and shook your hand too long. I met him exactly twice, and both times something in my gut went quiet and cold, the way it does on a roof when you feel a joint flex under your boot, and you know, before you know, that it isn't going to hold. I told Travis I didn't want that man around my company. Travis told me I was old-fashioned, and I let it go. That was in the spring of 2023, 3 weeks after I buried my wife, and I did not have 1 ounce of fight left in me. That was the last month my company was really mine. If you have ever ignored your own gut about someone and paid for it later, type the word gut in the comments. I want to know I'm not the only one. And stay with me, because what my bookkeeper showed me the next morning is the part I still can't fully believe. Back to that banquet hall. I sat there with the pen in my hand, 60 people watching me, and I did the only thing my brain could come up with. I patted my jacket, and I made a face, and I said, "Ah, hell. My reading glasses are in the truck. Travis, I'm not signing one thing in my life I haven't read. You know that." The room laughed. Somebody hollered, "That's the Dale I know." And I watched my son's face for exactly half a second before he got the smile back on it. And in that half second, I saw something I had never seen on my son's face before. Fear. Not embarrassment, fear. He said, "Sure, Dad. Monday. We'll do it Monday at the office." I told him Monday sounded fine. I shook 60 hands. I hugged my daughter. I thanked people for coming. And I drove home in my 2014 F-250 with 206,000 miles on it, and I sat in my driveway on Densmore Drive for 45 minutes without turning the engine off, staring at nothing. At 6:15 the next morning, I met Rosa Mendez at the Sunrise Diner on Monroe Street, in a corner booth in the back, and she brought a manila envelope she'd been carrying in her purse for 4 months. Rosa is 58 years old. She has been my bookkeeper since 2006. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold her coffee cup. She said, "Dale, I've been trying to make myself do this since February, and every time I think, what if I'm wrong, and I destroy a family, and I lose my job at 58 years old with a daughter in college? And then last night I watched him put a pen in your hand, and I couldn't do it anymore." She opened the envelope. Over the previous 26 months, Kowalski Mechanical had taken on $2,140,000 in equipment loans and business lines of credit. 6 separate lenders. 4 of them I had never heard of in my life. Every single one of them was personally guaranteed by me, Dale Kowalski, individually. Meaning, if the company couldn't pay, they came after my house, my truck, my savings, everything I had, and every single one of them had my signature on it. I looked at those signatures for a long time in that booth, and then I told Rosa something I don't think she understood at first. I said, "Rosa, look at the hand," because those signatures were smooth, clean, right slanted. They were the signature of a man with 2 good hands. They weren't mine. They had never been mine. Not one of them. And then Rosa turned the page and showed me where the money went. $2.1 million, paid out over 26 months, almost entirely to a single vendor, Renner Industrial Supply, LLC, for equipment, for parts, for materials. I have been in this business for 31 years. I know every supplier in Northwest Ohio. I know what a rooftop unit costs, and what a compressor costs, and what a truckload of ductwork costs. We never received one single piece of equipment from Renner Industrial Supply. Not one bolt. It didn't exist. It was a bank account with a name on it. My son and Doug Renner had borrowed $2.1 million against my life's work, in my name, with my forged signature, and split it. I sat in that diner booth, and I could not feel my own hands. And then Rosa said the thing that turned my blood to ice water. She said, "Dale, there's something else. 2 weeks ago, Travis had me pull every file where your signature is on a loan document. He said the lenders wanted them for an audit, and Dale, he told me to make sure the file showed you as the one who handled all the financing. He made me change the notes." I asked her what that meant. And Rosa, who has done books for small companies for 30 years, looked at me with her eyes full and said, "Dale, it means when this collapses, and it is going to collapse, those loans start coming due in November. He is going to say, 'It was all you,' and every document in that building says he's telling the truth." 2 days later, I sat in the office of a white-collar defense attorney named Warren Baptiste on Madison Avenue downtown, and he read every page Rosa had given me without saying a single word for 22 minutes. Then he took his glasses off and he told me the truth, and it was the worst thing anyone has ever said to me. He said, "Mr. Kowalski, I want to be very direct with you. Right now, today, on paper, you are not the victim of this crime. You are the criminal." He laid it out. 6 lenders, $2.1 million, federal wire fraud, and bank fraud, because those loan applications crossed state lines. My name on every guarantee, my signature on every document, my company, my title, my 22 employees, and a son who had already started telling the file that his father ran the money. If you walk into the FBI field office tomorrow morning with this envelope, Baptiste said, you will not be a witness. You will be a suspect, and at 61 years old, a first-time offender on a $2 million bank fraud is looking at somewhere between 8 and 15 years in federal prison. I asked him what happens if I just confront Travis, make him fix it, and Baptiste said, then he destroys every document that hasn't already been destroyed. He gets a lawyer, and he spends the next 18 months telling a grand jury his elderly father made him do it. Mr. Kowalski, your son has had 26 months to prepare his story. You have had 2 days. He leaned forward. So we are going to do this properly. We are not going to be fast. We are going to be correct. And the first thing you are going to do is walk back into that shop on Monday morning and act like nothing in the world is wrong. Before I tell you what my son said when he thought I was in the parking lot, do me one favor and hit subscribe if you haven't. You are going to want to be here for the meeting on that Friday. Now, back to it. Warren Baptiste built the case in 19 days, and I want to tell you exactly how, because the details are what saved my life. First, the hand. Baptiste brought in a forensic document examiner from Columbus, a woman named Anita Petrov, and gave her 40 of my real signatures going back to 1994. Tax filings, my marriage license, the mortgage on Densmore Drive, and the 6 forged loan guarantees. She wrote a report that I have read probably 100 times since. She found that my authentic signature shows the tremor and left-hand pressure pattern of a person with significant right-hand impairment, consistent across 3 decades. And she found that all 6 loan documents were signed by a right-handed writer with normal fine motor control, in a practiced imitation. Then she found the thing that ended it. One of those loan guarantees is dated March 9th, 2023. That's the day I buried Bonnie. I was at St. Hedwig's on Lagrange Street from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon in front of 200 people, and there is a funeral home register with 200 signatures in it to prove exactly where I was. My son forged my name on a $600,000 loan document on the day of his mother's funeral. When Anita Petrov told me that, I had to leave the room. Second, the money. Baptiste brought in a forensic accountant who traced Renner Industrial Supply, LLC, registered in Delaware, no employees, no warehouse, no phone number, a mailbox in a strip mall on Reynolds Road. Every dollar that went in came back out within 72 hours, split between Doug Renner and an account Travis had opened at a credit union in Monroe, Michigan, that I never knew existed. And third, Doug Renner had done this before, twice, to a paving contractor in Fort Wayne and a roofing outfit outside South Bend. Same structure, same shell company. Both times the owner took the fall and Renner walked away clean. Both of those men lost everything. One of them is still in prison. That's what my son brought into my company. And then there were the 19 days. 19 days of getting up at 5 in the morning and driving to my own shop and saying good morning to my son. 19 days of him bringing me coffee and asking about my weekend and saying, "Dad, we've really got to get those transfer papers signed." I said Monday. Then I said the following Monday. I told him my lawyer was reviewing them, which was true in a way he did not understand. I ate Sunday dinner at his house in Perrysburg. I sat at his table, and I let his wife serve me, and I held my granddaughter on my knee, and I looked across at my son, and I smiled at him, and inside me, there was nothing but a cold, flat, humming silence. That was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Harder than the funeral, harder than the hand. On day 14, he almost caught me. I was in the file room at 7:40 in the evening, photographing original documents with my phone, the way Baptiste had told me to, and I heard the side door. I got the drawer shut and I was standing at the coffee machine when Travis walked in. He looked at me a long moment and asked what I was still doing there. I told him I couldn't sleep and that the house is very quiet since his mother died. And he softened and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "You've got to let go, Dad. Sign the papers. Let me take care of you." He meant it. That's the part that still keeps me awake. In that moment, I believe my son genuinely thought he was being kind to me. On day 17, the recorder got him. Baptiste had me carry a small digital recorder, legal in Ohio, One-party consent, I checked. That afternoon, Travis thought I'd left for a job site on Airport Highway, but I'd come back for a torque wrench, and I was standing in the parts room, 20 feet away, on the other side of a partition wall. He was on the phone with Doug Renner, and I stood there and listened to my son say this. He signs Friday. Once it's transferred, it's his problem, not mine. He's 61, he's got no record, he'll get 5 years, maybe less, and honestly, he's had a good run. By the time it lands on him, I'm clean and I'm gone. Then he laughed, and he said he'd sign his own death certificate if I told him it was an equipment lease. I stood in that parts room, in the shop I built with my own hands, and I listened to my son sell me for 5 years of a stranger's life. I did not go home and rage. I drove to Warren Baptiste's office on Madison Avenue, and I put the recorder on his desk, and I said, "Set the meeting." We did it on a Friday morning, October 3rd, at 10 a.m., in the conference room of Kowalski Mechanical. Travis had the leather folder. The notary in the gray blazer was back. Doug Renner was there in his good shoes, sitting in my chair, because I suppose he already thought of it as his. And Travis smiled at me and said, "Ready, Dad?" I said, "Almost." I asked a few people to join us. Warren Baptiste came in first and set his briefcase on the table. Then Rosa Mendez, who would not look at Travis. Then Anita Petrov with her folder. And then 2 men who did not need to be introduced, because Doug Renner recognized what they were before either of them said a word. Special Agent Curtis Ammons of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and his partner. Doug Renner stood up so fast his chair went over backward. Travis didn't move at all. He just looked at me, and he said very quietly, "Dad, what did you do?" I said, "Sit down, son." And then I let Baptiste work. He laid out Anita Petrov's report. 6 forged signatures, right-handed, on a man with a crushed right hand. He laid out the loan dated March 9th, 2023, and he set the funeral register beside it, and he asked my son to explain to a federal agent how his father had signed a $600,000 guarantee while standing at his wife's casket. Travis said nothing. Baptiste laid out Renner Industrial Supply, the Delaware Shell, the mailbox on Reynolds Road, $2.1 million for equipment that never existed, and the credit union account in Monroe, Michigan. Travis said nothing, and then Warren Baptiste set a small black recorder on the conference table and pressed play. He's 61. He's got no record. He'll get 5 years, maybe less. And honestly, he's had a good run. I have never heard a room go that quiet. My son's own voice, filling the conference room of the company I started out of the back of a van in 1994. Travis put his face in his hands, and I said the only thing I had left to say to him, "Your mother sat in that office and did our invoices by hand for 11 years so we could make payroll, and you signed her funeral away for a kickback. If you think this old machinist got what he was owed, comment the word justice below. I need to know you're out there." Doug Renner was arrested that morning in the parking lot on Matzinger Road. He was charged federally with conspiracy to commit bank fraud and wire fraud, and because of Fort Wayne and South Bend, he was charged as a repeat offender. He went to trial, he lost, and he was sentenced to 11 years and 4 months. He is serving it at FCI Elkton in Columbiana County. My son took a plea. Travis pled guilty to bank fraud and aggravated identity theft. He cooperated, which shortened it. He was sentenced on February 20th to 7 years, and he is serving that sentence at FCI Milan, in Milan, Michigan, which is 51 minutes from my front door. I have driven that 51 minutes 11 times now. He has agreed to see me 4 of those times, and I want to tell you the honest truth about what those visits are like, because I think you deserve it. My son has never once said he was sorry. Not one time. He has told me that I overreacted. He has told me that he would have paid it back. He has told me that if I'd just signed the papers, the company would have survived and none of this would have happened, and that this is, in a way, my fault. He is 34 years old and he still believes that. I go anyway. I'll keep going. Because I made him, and I raised him, and somewhere in there is the boy who used to fall asleep in the jump seat of my van on the way home from a service call. A father doesn't get to hand that back. You just learn to carry it. The company survived, barely. The lenders came after me hard, because my name was on those guarantees whether I signed them or not, and it took Warren Baptiste 8 months to unwind it. I had to sell the building and the yard on Matzinger Road. We lease now, out on Hill Avenue, ironically about 400 yards from where that press took my hand in 1988. But all 22 of my people still have their jobs, every single one. That was the only line I would not cross, and we did not cross it. Rosa Mendez is the vice president of Kowalski Mechanical now. Her name is on the door, and there's a share of the company in her name, because a woman who was terrified of losing her job at 58 years old walked up to me in a room full of people and risked everything to tell me the truth. There is no amount of money that squares that debt. But she'll never worry about a paycheck again as long as I'm breathing. Megan comes by on Sundays. She works nights in the cardiac unit, and she's tired all the time, and she sits at my kitchen table and tells me about her patients, and I listen. She's the one who told me something a few months back that I've thought about every day since. She said, "Dad, you didn't lose a son. You found out who he was. Those aren't the same thing. I did not retire. 61 years old, and I'm still climbing rooftops in January. And I'll be honest with you, I'm glad. That banquet hall on Airport Highway wasn't a retirement party. It was a trap with a cake in it. So if there's one thing I want you to take from all of this, it's this. The people who love you don't need your signature in a hurry. Anybody who tells you not to read it, not to think about it, not to bother your pretty head, that person is not protecting you. They are working you. Read every page, every single time, even when it's your own blood putting the pen in your hand, especially then. 60 people watched my son hand me that pen. Only one of them had the courage to tell me what was really in the folder. If this story got to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell me honestly in the comments, if it were your child, could you still drive 51 minutes to visit them? I read every reply. Thank you for sitting a while with an old machinist from Toledo. I'll see you in the next one.